So here are the polls, 3 polls that will tell you that the Nader Gonzalez agenda is a majority agenda. Inferentially and item by item, 81% of the American people think the country's going in the wrong direction. That's the highest level ever registered. 75% of the people in this country think corporations have too much control over their lives. And 61% of the people in this country in a Gallup poll say that the 2 major parties are failing.
That's what we're here for. That's what I'm here to talk about, is gaining access to the debates. And the reason it is so difficult today to gain that access, you're looking at him. No, you're looking at why it's so difficult. Because I proved you could win if you're allowed to debate. If you are allowed in the debates, the candidate that no one gives a chance to, lo and behold, can win. It's happened. I did it. I was polling at the primary a mere 10%. Now, this is 7 weeks before the general election, 10%. But I was allowed to debate, and we probably had a half a dozen or more debates. After the first debate, I started making a, shall we call it a meteoric rise? And the timing was perfect, that by the time the last debate took place, maybe 3 days before the election took place, I was polling now 27%, but let's remember now, you're in a 3-way race. So you got to throw out all those normal numbers. You're in a 3. Well, they were then calling it a dead heat between all 3, but here's what happened. The Secretary of State predicted there would be a 50% voter turnout that year because it was a non-presidential. Lo and behold, it ended up 60%. I was at 27, that additional 10% that came out and voted because I was allowed to debate, people they didn't count on. See, if they open these debates up, more people that maybe normally would not vote will come out and vote. They will do it. And we were the proof. The proof is in the pudding, as they like to say. I garnered that extra 10% that the experts said wouldn't be there, and lo and behold, as we said that fateful November night in '98, we shocked the world.
Let me ask you this. If you had lived in the early part of the 20th century, and somebody had come to you and said, don't vote for Eugene Debs, the candidate that supports the right of women to vote, because you're throwing your vote away. He's only going to get 5 or 6% of the vote. You're throwing your vote away. What would you have done? Well, first off, all the women in the room, you wouldn't have been able to vote. So my question is for the men. What would you have done? And for the women, what would you have wanted them to do? What would you want them to do? You would want them to say, I'm sorry. This is an important enough issue now that needs to be dealt with now. It is not something where we're going to allow the major candidates in contention to talk about, well, maybe women, when they reach the age of 30, maybe if they, all of this rubbish that we cannot even repeat today because it sounds so damn foolish. Fast forward to today. Here we are. What are we doing? We're fighting to get into debates. What's wrong with that? This is a democracy. So what does the other side tell you? They say, these guys are irrelevant. We don't debate them because they're irrelevant. Oh, is that right? You heard Governor Ventura say he got in debates and started to do great. When I ran for mayor of San Francisco, I started with 6% in the polls in 2003. They let me in the debates. I ended up with 47% of the vote. I didn't win the contest, but that is a hell of a difference. Imagine that.
You heard Matt Gonzalez mention Eugene Debs. In the early 20th century, Debs was asked at the end of his career, he ran for president for about five times, but I have a unique affinity with him. So, and great labor leader, probably the greatest labor leader in our country's history. And he was asked by a reporter. Reporter said, Mr. Debs, what's your greatest regret? And Mr. Debs looked at the reporter and said, my greatest regret? Here's my greatest regret. My greatest regret is that under our Constitution, the American people can have almost anything they want, but they don't seem to want much of anything at all. That goes to the expectation level, doesn't it? Now, fast forward 1945, end of World War II, the U.S. is the colossus, the most powerful economic, technological, military force in the world. Western Europe, rubble, in ruins, devastated. Cities, countryside, disease, the smoke still coming up from the devastation of that war. The people in Western Europe, starting from rubble, working through their social democratic parties, multi-party system, working through their trade unions, working through their cooperatives, and just raising their expectation level about what kind of life they wanted to have. That they really wanted to work in order to live. Not what they say about us in this country, where we live in order to work. And here's what they did. Through their institutions and through their public demands and marches and rallies and strikes, this is what they demanded by law for all their people. They demanded universal health insurance, and they got it. They demanded decent pensions, and they got it. They demanded a living wage, and they got it. They demanded university-free tuition, and they got it. They demanded daycare, and they got it. They demanded public transit, and they got it. They demanded paid maternity leave and paid family sick leave, and they got it. They demanded laws that facilitated forming trade unions and cooperatives, and they got it. And 63 years later, in the land of the free, in the home of the brave, we don't have any of this by law for everyone. Some labor union contracts may have this and that. There are people working for the federal government who don't even get paid maternity leave. We don't have it 63 years later. Now, who's dominated the political scene for 63 years? The Republicans and the Democrats. They didn't get it done in the 40s. They didn't get it done in the 50s or the 60s or the 70s or the 80s or the 90s or the 2000s. Even when the Democrats controlled the White House and both houses of Congress, they didn't get it done. What makes anybody in this country think that these two parties, indentured to corporate power and their corporate paymasters, will ever get it done? And we're going to say to the American people, let's vote for the least worst. You know, there comes a time, doesn't there, when the least worst is just not good enough anymore.
You don't even know I'm alive. You don't even know I'm alive. 'Cause baby, to you, all I am is the invisible man. Tell him, Justin.